teleSUR English presents a new episode of China Now, Huawei Media's production that showcases the culture, technology, and abilities of the Asian giant. The first segment, China Currents, goes over Huawei's latest launch, showing China's technological reach and how it comes to play facing U.S. economic hostilities, and also addresses China's economic strategies, specifically in the real estate sectors, as well as COVID prevention strategies, given the resurgence of the pandemic. Let's see.
China Currents is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to China Currents. I'm Chris. Last week, the top trending news on Chinese social media was undoubtedly Huawei's new cell phone, Mate 60 Pro. As we reported earlier, Huawei released the phone on August 29th, the day which US Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo was about to wrap up her 4-day visit to China. Huawei's new 5G release was thus seen as a symbolic victory for Huawei in defying DC sanctions, demonstrating China's ability to make technological breakthroughs despite the challenges it faces. The Mate 60 Pro smartphone has ignited curiosity among tech enthusiasts and industry observers, particularly regarding the origin of the chips used in the device. Due to its sudden release and following sold out, many did not have the chance to obtain the cell phone, but by last week, experts have finally received their phones that shed light on the somehow mysterious cell phone. While Huawei has remained tight-lipped about the specifics of chip technology used in the Mate 60 Pro, a teardown analysis conducted by Tech Insights, a Canadian semiconductor intelligence firm, suggests that chip in question is the Kirin 9000S, manufactured by China's leading foundry, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corp. (SMIC). The Mate 60 Pro's launch has led to an outpouring of national pride, with Chinese netizens hailing the device as a testament to China's ability to make significant technological strides in the face of stringent US sanctions. In the past week, consumers flocked to Huawei stores to buy the new model, priced at 6,999 yuan, that's $958, leading to a surge in stock prices of companies related to the sector, including a 5% increase for SMIC. Following Huawei's breakthrough in the US sanction, the White House was forced to change its tactics. On September 3rd, Gina Raimondo, the US Secretary of Commerce, who got ambushed by Huawei during her visit to China, made a statement about US policy regarding Chinese chips. Unlike previous statements in which stressed both chips at military and civilian level, Raimondo merely addressed that the US will not sell the most sophisticated chips to the Chinese military. She did not deny the possibility of selling chips to China in the future as well. After Huawei's Mate 60 Pro smartphone surprised the market, China's chip breakthrough on the civilian level had been proved, leaving the military-level chips the last resort for the US to contain China technically. Many Chinese see the US ambiguity as an attempt to compromise. However, Chinese netizens believe that the White House would not go quietly. The public is concerned that the compromise can merely be a tactic to erode China's self-developed chip industry, luring it to be dependent on the US once again. Some also consider the US as taking the last chance to gain profit from the chip trades before China researched more of its own. But either way, Raimondo's tough statements on military chip restrictions did not trigger much reaction. It's just never a secret. The high-tech sector is now the only place in which US loosens its grip. On September 6th, the US Trade Representative Catherine Tai announced the extension of tariff exclusions on 352 Chinese imports and 77 COVID-19 related categories until December 31st, including face masks, examination gloves, and hand sanitizing wipes. The exemptions were previously set to expire on September 30th. Under the Trump administration, tariffs were imposed on Chinese imports in the name of national security using Section 301 of the 1974 Trade Act. Over 2,200 Chinese imports were granted exemptions during this time, including 549 that received a 1-year extension. However, all exemptions expired at the end of 2020. In October 2021, the USTR proposed reinstating the 549 expired exemptions and opened a period of public comment. Nearly half a year later, the USTR confirmed 352 of these exemptions in a March 2022 statement. The exemptions have since been repeatedly extended, now through the end of this year, and critics argue the tariffs have increased costs for American businesses and consumers without achieving stated policy goals. The renewal of 77 COVID-19 related medical products is likely related to the resurgence of the pandemic in the United States. According to the CDC, the number of hospitalized COVID-19 patients has been in a steady increase since late June, with over 17,400 cases reported on August 26th. Many individuals who have received double vaccination and booster, for instance, First Lady Joe Biden, have been found positive for COVID-19 for the second time. With China's removal of COVID-19 testing requirement for foreign travelers on August 30th, this announcement will undoubtedly provide significant market opportunities for Chinese medical equipment manufacturers to find sales outlets. Next up, another piece about international trade. On September 4th, Japan submitted a complaint to the World Trade Organization regarding China's ban on Japanese seafood, stating the action is totally unacceptable and that it strongly urges China to immediately repeal its measures. The complaint has been faced with strong criticism in China, calling it ridiculous and unjustified. Chinese netizens condemned Japan for its attempt to shift blame onto China despite its own action of disposing nuclear contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean. Beijing maintains that its ban on Japanese seafood is a necessary measure to ensure the safety of Chinese consumers and have acted in accordance with WTO regulations by implementing emergency measures to protect consumers from potential harm. As the trade dispute between China and Japan escalates, both countries are cautious against straining the origin of fragile relations. Looking ahead, Japan is seeking talks with China to resolve the trade dispute, with top officials of both countries set to cross paths at the ASEAN summit. Next up, let's turn to Chinese economy. Starting last week, major Chinese cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen began to stimulate the housing market by widening a definition of first-time home buyers to give more people access to preferential mortgages. Under the new policy, when a household applies for a loan to purchase residential property and none of its members own a home in the local area, regardless of whether they have previously used loans to buy property, financial institutions will consider it as the first home purchase and apply corresponding housing credit policies. As the policy takes effect, first-time home buyers and those seeking to upgrade their housing have quickly made decisions, resulting in a noticeable impact. According to some real estate sales personnel in Beijing and Shanghai, after policy was implemented, the daily sales volume of new housing projects almost exceeded that of the previous month. Experts believe that this policy will stimulate market demand, substantially reduce the cost of home buying, and provide a positive direction for the market, contributing to the stable and healthy development of the real estate sector in China. It is expected that more cities will introduce similar policies in the near future, further enhancing the vitality of the real estate market. Real estate is not the only sector that the Chinese government cares about. On September 4th, China's National Development and Reform Commission established a new institution called Bureau for Private Economy Development. The new bureau is responsible for enhancing communication between private enterprises and the government. It is also in charge of coordinating the preferential policies toward the private sector. Unlike other government institutions in China, based on the latest information, the new bureau does not have supervision responsibilities over the enterprises. The bureau was set up amid China's economic recovery from COVID. With the youth unemployment rate hitting record high, China is finding this way to create more jobs in the private sector. Previously in July, China's State Council issued a 31-point guideline on boosting private economy, calling to improve the business environment. Opinions on Chinese internet are sharply divided. Despite the promise from the government, many believe that the state is deepening its intervention in private enterprises. "We don't need the officials to tell us what to do," netizens wrote on social media. The others are convinced that the Bureau will help to turn the guidelines into policies preferential to the enterprises. With the Bureau's existence, business will be less disrupted by arbitrary bureaucracy. Next up, a recent survey report released by Micos Institute revealed that the employment focus of Chinese college graduates have further shifted to prefecture-level cities and below. the education sector is the main absorber of graduates in these regions. According to the income data from the survey, the monthly income of college graduates who started teaching in prefecture level cities and below in the 2022 cohort was 4,468 won. This is an increase of 378 won compared to the 2018 cohort, but it's lower than that of the national average for undergraduates in 2022. However, the job satisfaction of this group not only exceeds the national average level, but is also significantly increased. The data shows that the job satisfaction of college graduates teaching in prefecture-level cities and below in the 2022 cohort is 84%, a substantial increase of 9 percentage points compared to the 2018 cohort. The shift in employment focus and the corresponding satisfaction level indicates that more graduates are finding rewarding work in smaller cities and in the education sector. While their income may be slightly lower than the national average, the job satisfaction level suggests that the value factors beyond monetary compensation. Next up, let's turn to Chinese technology. On September 7th, the China-Indonesia joint high-speed railway connecting Jakarta and Bandung officially opened, reducing travel time between the two cities from 3.5 hours to just 40 minutes. The 142 km long Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway is Indonesia and Southeast Asia's first high-speed rail system, fully adopting Chinese technology and standards. With a maximum operating speed of 350 km per hour, the new railway is a cooperation project between China and Indonesia under Indonesia's Global Maritime Fulcrum and China's Belt and Road Initiative. It will begin commercial operations in early October. Next up, on September 4th, NIO co-founder Chin Li Hong revealed that the electric vehicle maker plans to launch its first smartphone product, the NIO Phone, on September 21st. The NIO Phone is already in production, and the company plans to release an entirely new model annually, similar to Apple. According to reports, the NIO Phone has received network access licensing from the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, and will support UWB, that's ultra-wideband technology. This suggests that NIO Phone may serve as a digital car key for NIO vehicles and help build a portfolio of terminal devices centered around the car. At the same time that EV makers like NIO are crossing over to the smartphone industry, major smartphone brands also making a reverse move into automotives. It was revealed that Xiaomi's automotive program is currently in trial production, beginning just 1 month ago. Xiaomi is currently producing around 50 test vehicles per week. Sources say Xiaomi received approval from the MIIT within the last 2 months and could receive full approval by the end of this year. Once approved, Xiaomi will be able to immediately ramp up the mass production of Xiaomi-branded cars. Lastly, let's take a look at the Chinese cinema. According to data from Maoyan, Christopher Nolan's new film Oppenheimer has made 258 million yuan in China after 8 days, surpassing the recent popular Hollywood blockbuster Barbie. From September 1st to 6th, Oppenheimer was the top-grossing film in China each day. As a biopic about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the legendary American physicist known as the father of the atomic bomb, the film has also sparked passion among Chinese audience in revisiting this period of World War II history and nuclear warfare. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts and comments about our show, please reach us at the email address below. I'm Chris. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and see you next time.
We'll go for a short break now, but we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to China Now. In a second moment, the segment Currents abounds on Huawei's 5G new Mate 60 Pro cell phones, as well as a new scientific development to replicate the sun's core as an energy source. And the new segment Things Forward explores the new geopolitical landscape and the demise of the dollar as a weaponized currency. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Lisa, and this is Threshold in China. Today we are going to share some exciting tech innovations and announcements that happened in China recently. Huawei recently released a new smartphone, and people are curious about the source of the chip. While Huawei did not specify the chip technology used in the phone, TechInsight, a Canadian semiconductor firm, took the phone apart and suggested that the chip is in fact the Kirin 9000S. It is manufactured using advanced 7nm process technology. This new domestically made chip is hailed as a victory by Chinese as it defies US sanctions. Up until now, the best chip manufacturers in China had only publicly reported the mass production of 28nm chips. So how did Huawei suddenly jump to 7nm? In 2022, TechInsight also disassembled a crypto mining ASIC from Minerva, a fabless crypto mining semiconductor company. They found that the Minerva Bitcoin miner system on chip was manufactured by SMIC, and the parameter is very close to TSMC and Samsung's first generation 7nm process. This suggests three things. First, Chinese chip enterprises have acquired 7nm production capabilities. Second, if it's being used in mining machines, it means these chips have industrial patch delivery capabilities and not just a few experimental products from a laboratory. And third, the manufacturing time of these chips can be traced back to July 2021, indicating that the breakthrough to 7nm in China happened as early as 2021. But from a global perspective, the 7nm technology still lags behind the cutting-edge process currently used for smartphone chips. For example, the iPhone 15 uses 3nm process. According to Professor Lu Tingjie, the gap is 2 to 2.5 nodes, which means that Huawei's 5G chips are 3 to 5 years behind the forefront. However, given the rapid progress of China's semiconductor industry, the gap could be closed sooner. More importantly, reports suggest Mate 60 Pro sales have exceeded 800,000 units, with supply chain orders reaching 15 to 17 million. This high volume speaks to a stable supply of the 5G chips. For these production numbers to be achieved, Huawei and other manufacturers throughout its supply chain must have achieved major improvement in advanced process and effectively managing the yield rate of chip wafers, or else the cost of making a smartphone would be too high. Another interesting feature of the Mate 60 Pro is that it realizes direct satellite calls. By connecting to China's high-orbit Tiantong-1 communication satellite, the phone unlocks satellite calling beyond just sending short messages, something that was previously only possible with large antennas and high transmission power. Huawei making a comeback has definitely raised question on the effectiveness of sanctions, and experts suggest that US may impose even greater restrictions than what exists today to further curtail China's access to critical manufacturing technologies. Recently, US Commerce Secretary Raimondo announced US will not be selling advanced chips to China, with an intent to restrict the development of China's AI sector and limit end-to-end companies like Huawei from controlling communication endpoints. But for now, it seems that US chip makers were right when they warned that extensive sanctions would not stop China, but in fact motivated to redouble its effort to build alternative to US technologies. A phenomenon that is also happening to other sectors as the tech war intensifies. China and the United States have both announced major breakthroughs in stimulating nuclear fusion reactions of the sun. Recently, China's new generation artificial sun Huanliu 3 achieved a high confinement mode operation with a plasma current of a staggering 1 million amperes, the highest current ever for nuclear fusion. The Huanliu 3 device a tokamak using magnetic field to trap and squeeze a plasma of fusion fuel, creating temperatures about 7 times hotter than the core of the sun. At these scorching temperatures, the repulsive force between nuclei are overcome, leading to nuclear fusion. This breakthrough makes the entire system more controllable and cost-effective, thus promoting the commercialization of nuclear fusion. In late 2022, the United States National Ignition Facility (NIF) Renowned for its massive laser system, also accomplished the groundbreaking first ever ignition in history. This achievement signified the fusion reactions becoming a self-sustained engine, producing enough energy to maintain themselves and compensate for any energy loss, comparable to harness a star's energy. NIF used high-intensity lasers to superheat and squeeze a tiny fusion fuel pellet, inducing a short-lived but powerful burst of fusion reactions. Although using dramatically different approaches, both of these breakthroughs bring us closer to a future of unlimited energy possibilities. The two main techniques to achieve this are magnetic confinement and inertial confinement. Both methods use hydrogen isotope as fuel. When these isotopes fuse together, they form helium and release a tremendous amount of energy in the form of heat and neutrons. Magnetic confinement aims for a steady-state fusion reaction, which means using strong magnetic field to contain hot plasma so the fusion reaction can occur continuously, providing a stable and consistent power output. This allows steady power production as a conventional power plant. However, the complexity and the large scale of the device required to maintain the plasma present cost and operational challenges. Issues such as plasma instabilities, turbulence, and heat losses become more pronounced as the current increases, approaching the threshold of ignition. What is significant with Huanliu 3 is that it allows plasma current of 1 million amperes while maintaining stability. This high current brings scientists closer to achieve ignition and produce a net output of energy. Projects like Huanliu 3, as well as the International ITER project in France, in which China also participates, are making substantial progress in the field, aiming to make fusion a large-scale energy source. Inertial confinement, on the other hand, aims for a post-fusion reaction. It rapidly compresses a small pellet of fusion fuel using focused laser beam or particle beams. This causes a burst of fusion reaction like a tiny explosion for a very brief moment. This produces fusion in short pulses, offering flexibility in power generation and not in continuous power. However, it requires precision and synchronized laser pulses to compress the fuel pellet. When it comes to nuclear fusion power generation, it often seems like we are always 50 years away. However, recent research suggests that we probably don't have to wait that long. Developing a fusion reactor with clean, abundant energy with minimal environmental impact and no long-term radioactive waste is within our reach. Scientists anticipate that commercialization of nuclear fusion could be achieved by the mid-21st century, around 2050. Today, there are over 8 billion people on the planet. Our irresponsible actions caused the extinction of many animals. But did you know that we were once on the brink of extinction? And it is no less dramatic than the Cretaceous extinction event. In a study published in late August, Chinese scientists have shed light on the darkest chapter of human ancestral history. Utilizing a newly developed genomic model, they have revealed that during a prolonged period spanning over 100,000 years, the number of fertile individuals on Earth fell to a mere 1,280, bringing our ancestors dangerously close to extinction. Our understanding of population history has been constrained to the most recent 300,000 to 100,000 years due to the constraints of ancient DNA sequence technology and the Earth's climate, which hinders DNA preservation in fossils older than 300,000 years. To overcome that, scientists have applied innovative population genetic theories to decode the historical imprint left by our ancestors in our genomes. The co-ancestry rate, a measure of genetic relatedness or shared ancestry between individuals or populations in each generation, is influenced by the effective population size of prehistorical times. By examining these genetic imprints, researchers can infer the population size of our ancestors. But the signal preserved in our genome becomes weaker the further back in time they go. To combat this, researchers from the Shanghai Institute of Nutrition and Health have pioneered a new theoretical approach, FitCall. It gave us a new way to estimate the likelihood of observing a specific pattern of gene mutations in a group of individuals, which tells us about their shared history. So essentially, FitCall can take a census of ancient human population. The study involves the analysis of genomic sequence from 3,154 modern individuals. It reveals a long and brutal bottleneck period spanning from 930,000 to 813,000 years ago. During this time, 98.7% of human ancestors vanished, leaving an average adult population size of around 1,280 for the subsequent 117,000 years. Human beings were on the verge of extinction, and the real situation may have included some natural fluctuations, making the risk of ancestral human extinctions even higher than the literal interpretation suggests. As a consequence of this small population, human genetic diversity has decreased by 65.85%. So what exactly happened? It is highly likely that they faced ice ages and severe droughts, the violent climate change of the early Middle Pleistocene transition. Surviving all of these, our ancestors preserved, and according to the sequence results of African populations, after the bottleneck period, the ancient human population rapidly rebounded, increasing 20-fold. This could be attributed to both improved climate and learning how to make fires. The implications of this study go far beyond the realm of science and reach into the history of our common humanity. And that is all for today's Threshold. As always, please let us know if you like this new section on science and technology in China, and we will do more in the future.
So I want to, by way of an introduction, impress upon you how the United States is facing mounting problems, both at home and abroad. And these are intractable problems. They are not problems that the United States seems to be easily able to solve. They seem to be dubbing, they seem to be sending the United States in a spiral of decline, of economic chaos, social division, political logjam, etc. And this is going to, I think, worsen very radically in the coming year, given the US elections that are coming up, before there is any hope of it getting better. And I want to say a couple of things about how I see the new Cold War, de-dollarization, and the question of global governance being linked. And the phenomena that so many of us are now calling de-dollarization. In talking about de-dollarization, I have argued in my work that you have to understand de-dollarization as resting on two pillars. One of those pillars is the rise of external challenges, the increasing centrality of China as a source of world finance, the ability of countries to start trading in one another's currencies, currency swaps, alternatives to SWIFT, blah, blah, and so on. These are the most talked about. So the second pillar, so in addition to the external challenges, the second pillar on which de-dollarization rests are the internal contradictions of the dollar system, and they are very fundamental. In fact, you cannot understand de-dollarization without understanding these internal contradictions, because otherwise you will understand why people may prefer other alternatives, but you will not understand the collapse of the dollar system when it comes, and that is not that long in the future. And this is rarely mentioned, it is rarely understood. Indeed, we have an entire industry, an academic industry of people, largely based in the United States, whose sole purpose is to deny the internal contradictions of the dollar system and make it look as though it is the most natural thing in the world for the dollar to dominate the world economy, and how this dominance is going to continue forever and ever. So, obviously, I think most of us are aware that things are not going well for the US, both internationally and domestically, but it's useful to just enumerate what are some of the main issues. So obviously, the US's economic weight in the world economy is declining. As a consequence, of course, it is waging the new Cold War. It is essentially engaging in fairly comprehensive and hybrid aggression on many fronts, of which, of course, China and lately Russia have been particular targets. Nevertheless, and partly because of these sanctions, because of this declining economic weight, its sanctions are boomeranging. It is losing many allies, and even those who are left face a complex conundrum, because what the United States must demand from these remaining allies, which is a level of masochism, an ability to accept punishment, basically ensure that this scenario is not going to be stable. How long can you keep your allies if you are imposing such costs on your allies? So the surface appearance of unity and allegiance is superficial, and there are deep cracks that are already existing in these alliances. And finally, things are so bad for the United States that it is actually destroying the very system of open world governance. That is to say, a world governance based on the principle of free markets and free trade, whose principal purpose is to open up subordinated economies so that they may serve the interests of US corporations and so on. So, this very system of world governance, which it has been trying to create and maintain since the end of the Second World War, it is now forced to attack the very system, the principles of this very system. This is what is happening internationally. Domestically, its economy is mired in productive decline. Inequality in the United States is reaching unprecedented levels, and the cause of both of these is the heightened level of financialization that the US has engaged in since the 1970s, and which is the accompaniment of the dollar's world role. Today, the dollar's world role would not exist were it not for this casino-like and loan shark like predatory lending, speculative activity, etc., that occurs today in the US financial system. Thirdly, the US what US policies are creating social conflict, and indeed this social conflict is sometimes so bad that over the last couple of years, I'm sure many of you know, there have been books and articles written on the possibility of civil war in the United States. This is not light thinking. I think this is very real. It is necessary for the United States today to fight against inflation, and the return of inflation is actually one of the principal symptoms of the US's imperial decline. The return of inflation, same thing happened in the 1970s when the imperial system was tottering, and it's happening again today. The United States must necessarily fight against inflation, but in doing so, it will endanger the very financial system that it has created. But so essentially the US Federal Reserve is caught between a rock and a hard place. If it doesn't attack inflation, the dollar will be undermined because it is losing its value. If it attacks inflation, it is going to undermine the financial system, which is also necessary to retain the dollar's world role. So it is damned if it does, and it's damned if it doesn't. So this is the situation. Further, the US military record is one of quagmire and defeat after defeat. So all around, I would say the contradictions are mounting. Now, what is causing all this? To put this in perspective, let's look at the end of the Cold War. At the end of the Cold War, everybody thought that now the world would be united, peacefully united under the unipolar leadership or hegemony of the United States. The United States would enjoy unbridled power. It was the only remaining superpower, etc. What has happened is that instead of unipolarity, we have multipolarity. And multipolarity has occurred because of the decline of the United States and the rise of the West, both of which are in turn the result of the adoption of neoliberalism by the United States and the rejection of neoliberalism in whole or in part, preeminently by China and to a lesser extent by some other countries. So, the US is declining, the rest are rising, the United States is reacting, so no unipolarity, multipolarity instead, and the United States is reacting to this reality with unrestrained aggression, military and hybrid. So you see that there is no peace within either. But we could also look further back into history to put this in perspective. What we see is, first of all, is the US failure to successfully emulate UK-style dominance over the world system. When the US saw the UK weakening in the early 20th century and the sterling system weakening, so it thought that it could easily step into the shoes of the United States, which is why you have all these theories of hegemony. The US did not succeed in achieving this desire. In part, this was because the US had the misfortune of taking up the leadership of the capitalist world and the imperialist world when the decline of imperialism had already set in. I consider, I think for obvious reasons, probably you guys do as well, 1914 to have been the peak of imperialism and of the imperial system. And the long-term decline of the imperial system since 1914 has been occurring thanks to advancing multipolarity. So then how do we see the linkages between the New Cold War, de-dollarization and world governance? I think it should be clear by now that the US is waging the New Cold War to stem its imperial decline with the only means it has left, and that is coercive power. The United States has become economically so weak, it has run out of carrots with which to run the world economy. Now it only has sticks. And so it is going to wield these sticks, but they are not going to have a lot of effect. They are not going to be very effective. Secondly, the very decline of the US is ensuring that it cannot win the New Cold War, but will only suffer perverse consequences, such as putting the system of world governance it has sought to construct over the past century in danger, and de-dollarization is the chief aspect of it. Obviously, the boomeranging of sanctions is another part of it, and let me just say also, to anticipate one of my conclusions, the demise of this system of world governance is not something we should shed many tears over. It was an imperial system of governance, and we now have the opportunity to try to create a truly post-imperial system of world governance. China will, of course, play a very important role. And thirdly, of course, the crisis of imperial world governance gives the world majority, this is a term I learned on a recent trip to Russia, when the Russian policymakers are scratching their heads saying, okay, what are we doing? Are we joining the third world? Are we joining, what grouping are we joining? So they'll come up with this idea of the world majority, which is actually not a bad one. Anyway, so what the crisis of imperial governance gives the world majority an opportunity to rebuild world governance, including the world monetary and financial system on radically different post-imperialist principles. And I think, so obviously we know that there are rising alternatives. What we are witnessing more and more is the emergence of alternative institutions, many of which will probably survive into a new post-imperial governance system, so they will probably be the building blocks, or at least the early versions of the new post-imperial governance system. So we have new multilateral institutions, the new development bank, the contingency reserve agreement, and so on. These are the most important, I think, because of the centrality of China, the new China-centered financial and development institutions, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Belt and Road Initiative, and more broadly, the many-sided lending activities of China's banks, which are not necessarily covered under any of these rubrics. There are, of course, increasing number of bilateral agreements to use non-Western currencies. More and more countries are trying to also stabilize their agreements to use each other's currencies. The currency swaps that stabilize the values of the mutual values of the currencies and so on. So there are swap agreements. There are alternatives to a Western-dominated payment system, SWIFT. There is increasing exploration of the potential of digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, to aid in the process, to facilitate trade between countries without the resorting to the use of the dollar. And of course, last but not least, the weaponization of the dollar system by the United States, most recently seen in the sequestering of Russian reserves, but it also has many precursors. There was the seizure of Afghan reserves, the seizure of Venezuelan reserves. So all of these are instances of the way in which the United States, despite all the rhetoric about how it provides the dollar to the world as a public good and its financial system as a public good, in fact, the financial system has always been actively in the interest of the United States corporations and entities. So the weaponization of the dollar system, as it has increased, has made more and more countries wary of using the US dollar and the financial system.
And this was another episode of China Now, a show that opens a window to the present and the future of the Asian giant. Hope you enjoy it. See you next time.